The Veil of Fate. Welcome to the Story King, where every tale reveals a kingdom of emotions. The throne room fell silent as King Aldrich's claws scraped against the obsidian armrest, a sound that had preceded countless executions. "You expect me to accept this?" His voice was a low growl that made the chandeliers tremble. The massive Lycan King rose to his full height, nearly 8 feet of corded muscle and barely contained rage. His amber eyes blazed as he stared down at the trembling emissary from the eastern valley. The old man bowed lower, his scroll shaking in his weathered hands. "Your Majesty, the treaty requires." "I know what the treaty requires." Aldrich's words cut like a blade. "Peace between our kingdoms in exchange for a bride. A political pawn dressed in silk and lies." For 300 years, Aldrich had ruled the northern territories alone. He had crushed rebellions, survived assassination attempts, and built an empire that stretched across 5 mountain ranges. He had never needed anyone. The very idea of an arranged marriage was an insult to everything he had achieved. But war was coming. The shadow clans from beyond the frozen wastes were gathering, and even the mighty Lycan King couldn't fight on 2 fronts. The Eastern Valley's army would be crucial to survival. And sir, he had agreed to this farce. "When does she arrive?" he asked coldly. "She's here, Your Majesty." Waiting in the Rose Chamber. Aldrich's jaw tightened. Of course she was. They'd probably rushed her here before he could change his mind. He dismissed the emissary with a wave of his clawed hand and stalked toward the Rose Chamber, his footsteps echoing through the stone corridors like a death march. He would go through with the ceremony. He would bind himself to this stranger for the sake of his people. But she would learn quickly that being queen meant nothing. She would have her title, her chambers, and nothing more. His heart had died long ago, buried with the family he'd lost to war. This bride would receive his name and his protection, but never his affection. The Rose Chamber doors stood before him, carved with intricate patterns of wolves and moonlight. Aldrich pushed them open without bothering to knock. She stood by the window, her back to him, wrapped in a traveling cloak of deep crimson. A heavy veil covered her head and cascaded down her shoulders, obscuring everything but her silhouette. She was smaller than he expected, barely reaching his chest, he estimated. Fragile, breakable, perfect for a decorative queen who would stay out of his way. "So you're the bride they've sent me," he said, his tone deliberately harsh. "Better to establish the nature of this arrangement immediately." She turned slowly, and though he couldn't see her face, he felt her gaze upon him through the veil. She didn't speak, didn't bow, didn't cower. The silence stretched between them, and Aldrich found himself unexpectedly irritated by her composure. "I assume you understand the terms," he continued, circling her like prey. "This is a political arrangement. Nothing more. You'll have quarters in the East Wing, separate from mine. You'll attend state functions when required. Otherwise, I expect you to occupy yourself with whatever trivial pursuits noble ladies enjoy." Still, she said nothing. "Do you understand?" he demanded, stopping directly in front of her. "Or did they send me a bride without a tongue?" "I understand perfectly." Her voice was soft but steady, with an accent he couldn't quite place. "You've agreed to a marriage you despise with a woman you've already decided to hate. You've built walls so high that you believe yourself unreachable, and you think cruelty will protect you from disappointment." Aldrich felt his hackles rise. "You forget yourself. I am your king." "You're a king who's forgotten what he's fighting for," she replied quietly. "But I didn't come here to debate with you, Your Majesty. I came because my people need this alliance as much as yours do. Shall we proceed with the ceremony?" Something in her tone sparked his anger further. She was mocking him, gently, but mocking nonetheless. He wanted to rage at her, to show her exactly who held power here. Instead, he forced himself to breathe deeply. "The ceremony is in 1 hour. Someone will escort you to prepare." He turned to leave, then paused. "And in the future, you would do well to remember that I've killed for lesser insolence than what you've just shown me." "Then I suppose I should be grateful you're a king who keeps his word," she said. Even about marriages you don't want. He left before he said something he'd regret. The great hall was packed with witnesses, lords and ladies from both kingdoms, generals and advisors, merchants and common folk allowed in to witness their king's wedding. Aldrich stood at the altar in formal dress, his ceremonial crown resting on his dark hair, and tried to ignore how much this felt like a cage closing around him. The doors opened, and his bride appeared. She walked alone, no father to give her away, no attendants fussing with her train. Just her, moving down the aisle with surprising grace, still veiled, still mysterious. Her gown was simpler than he'd expected, white silk that caught the light, embroidered with silver thread in patterns that reminded him of starlight. As she approached, Aldrich caught a scent that made his wolf stir for the first time in years. Pine and snow and something wild, like winter wind across mountain peaks. It was intoxicating and unsettling in equal measure. She reached the altar and turned to face him. Through the veil, he could make out nothing of her features. The high priest began the ceremony, his words washing over Aldrich without meaning. He spoke his vows mechanically, his mind already planning how to keep his distance from this woman who had disrupted his carefully ordered life. And now, the priest intoned, "Let the veil be lifted so that all may witness the joining of two souls." This was the moment, the formal revelation of the bride's identity, a tradition as old as the kingdom itself. Aldrich steeled himself to look upon the face of the stranger he was about to bind himself to forever. Two attendants stepped forward and gently lifted the veil. The world stopped. Aldrich's breath caught in his throat. His heart, that organ he'd thought long dead, suddenly hammered against his ribs. Every instinct in his body roared to life at once. She was beautiful, yes, wild dark hair tumbling past her shoulders, high cheekbones, full lips. But that wasn't what froze him in place. It was her eyes, one green as spring forests, one gold as autumn leaves. Heterochromia, jewel-colored eyes. And he knew exactly what that meant. "No," he whispered, the word torn from him. "It's not possible." She met his gaze steadily, and in those mismatched eyes, he saw ancient knowledge, deep power, and something that made his wolf howl in recognition. The room erupted in gasps and whispers. Everyone present understood what they were witnessing. She wasn't just a bride from the Eastern Valley. She was a Moonborn, one of the lost bloodline, the children of the first wolf. The legends said they appeared once in a generation, marked by the jewel eyes and blessed with powers that could reshape kingdoms. They were supposed to be extinct, wiped out in the purge 2 centuries ago. But here she stood, impossibly alive, watching him with those extraordinary eyes. "You knew," Aldrich breathed, anger and wonder warring in his chest. "The Eastern Valley knew what you were and sent you anyway. They sent me because asterisk of what I am," she corrected softly. "The Shadow clans aren't just coming for your territories, Aldrich. They're coming for me. They've been hunting my bloodline for 200 years. This marriage, this alliance, it's the only thing that might save both our peoples." His mind raced. A Moonborn bride changed everything. The political implications alone were staggering. But more than that, his wolf recognized her, not just as powerful, not just as rare, as mate, the one thing he'd never expected to find, the one thing he'd convinced himself he didn't need. Before he could respond, before he could process what was happening, a sound split the air, a horn blast from the watchtowers, low and urgent. The warning for attack. Chaos erupted in the great hall. Guards rushed toward the doors. Nobles screamed and scattered, and through the massive stained glass windows, Aldrich saw them, dark shapes descending from the sky like a nightmare made flesh. The Shadow clans had come. But they weren't attacking the castle walls. They were diving straight toward the great hall. Toward her. Aldrich's bride grabbed his arm, her touch sending electric shocks through him even in the midst of crisis. "Aldrich, listen to me. When they breach those windows, you need to." The glass exploded inward in a rain of colored shards. Dark figures poured through the openings, creatures of smoke and shadow with burning red eyes. At their center flew a being that made even Aldrich's ancient blood run cold, a Shadow Lord, wrapped in darkness so thick it seemed to devour the light itself. The Moonborn, the creature's voice boomed, echoing with the screams of 1,000 tortured souls. After 2 centuries, we have found you. His bride's hand tightened on Aldrich's arm. He could feel her trembling now, though her face remained calm. Aldrich, she whispered urgently, before this began, there's something else you need to know. The reason they want me dead. The reason I'm truly here. The Shadow Lord descended toward them, claws extended, darkness spreading like poison through the hall. What? Aldrich demanded, moving in front of her instinctively, his body already shifting, claws extending. What else? She looked up at him with those impossible eyes, and what he saw there made everything else, the interrupted wedding, the attacking horde, his carefully maintained solitude, seem insignificant. I'm not just Moonborn, she said, her voice carrying a power that made the very air vibrate. I'm the last Moonborn, and according to the prophecy, our union doesn't just create an alliance between kingdoms. The shadows closed in. The Shadow Lord raised his claws for the killing blow. It awakens the ancient pack, she finished, and makes you the Alpha of legend, the one who can command death itself. Her eyes began to glow, one green as life, one gold as the sun. And in that moment, Aldrich realized his arranged marriage wasn't a prison at all. It was a weapon. Subscribe to the Story King for tales that crown your imagination with wonder.